In February 2017, an Ontario judge presiding over a class action lawsuit ruled that the federal government failed in its duty of care for thousands of Indigenous children who were taken from their homes during the Sixties Scoop from 1951 to 1991. Later that year, the federal government agreed to a financial settlement of $750 million to be split amongst the estimated 20,000 survivors. With interim payments being issued just this month, Jennifer Allen is a 60s Scoop survivor and received her first check just a few days ago. Thanks for joining us today, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me.
Now, $21,000 you received just last week. Will that ever repay you for the pain and hurt that you've experienced in your childhood?
No, it won't. It's not even close.
So how do you feel about the settlement? What are your thoughts?
I'm very happy that at least the Canadian government acknowledged it and that yes, we're getting a settlement. But just seeing how it's being done, I'm not very impressed with it. Like when our residential school survivors, when Stephen Harper did his apology, it was a big to-do, like it was like in the House of Commons. On one side they had the priests, on the other side they had Native leaders, and everybody knew about it. Well, due to COVID-19, nobody seems to know anything about the 60s Scoop. They just see it in the newspaper, they sued the Canadian government, we agreed, we paid them, move on. Yeah. But they don't realize that the damage is the same. The damage done to Indigenous children in the 60s Scoop is no different than the damage that was done to residential school survivors.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think people are not focused on the 60s Scoop as much as residential schools?
Because there's not enough education behind it. No one knew about the 60s Scoop. No one knew what it even was. And so, but there's been a lot of education now about the residential school system and all the stuff that's happened with that. Nobody really knows about the 60 Scoop. So now it's upon us to go out and educate society about it. And that's why we're doing this interview.
Yeah. Tell us just in a short soundbite, and just for our viewers, we're going to sit down with Jennifer again and hear the full length of her story. But Jennifer, tell us just what was the 60 Scoop and what happened to many Indigenous children.
Well, like you said, the 60 Scoop went from 1951 to 1991. And in the 1960s is when it was very active, is that the RCMP would show up on Native reserves with school buses and social workers. And they'd take all the Native children away from their families and their parents, and they'd adopt them out to Caucasian families around the world. And basically, it was a goal, once again, to kill the Indian, save the child. And I believe it's Canada's largest case of human trafficking that they were never convicted of. Some children were born in Canada and raised in England, raised in France. Myself, I was born in the Yukon. I was raised in Nova Scotia. Another 60 Scoop survivor was born in Manitoba and raised in the United States. And some Native people never made it back to their families because they don't even know what nation they came from. They don't know who their family is.
So when this lawsuit, this class action lawsuit was brought forward, what was the hope of the 60s Scoop survivors? What was the hope that the government would do?
The hope is that the government would acknowledge it. They'd acknowledge that they did wrong. They'd acknowledge the damage that it did, and that they'd pay us back for the damage that they did. I think for me, it's just about them acknowledging that what they did was wrong, that now they realize that what they did is they set us up for genocide, that it was just a continuation of genocide. Like I talk about the pipeline genocide against Indigenous people, from residential school, the 60 Scoop, the Indian Act, the reserves, to now our missing Indigenous women's crisis.
Yeah, I think that's the question. Have things changed since, as you talk about wanting some sort of acknowledgement and apology, have things changed for Indigenous people in our country? What would you say to that?
No, things have not changed in Canada for Indigenous people. It's still a very racist place for Indigenous people. And recently, right now in British Columbia, our health minister is doing an investigation into the hospitals throughout British Columbia for playing racist games with Indigenous people's health, where Indigenous people would come into hospitals and the ER staff would place bets on how intoxicated they were. That's how this is today, it's 2020, and that's how we're treated by doctors when we go into a hospital. The 60 Scoop was just 1991. So really nothing's really changed. Like we're not seen as people on our land. We're still seen as people that need to be controlled and fixed.
Yeah. Well, as we look at an interim payment of 21,000, there obviously is hope that there will be more payments coming out through this reparations. What have you heard about further payment and acknowledgement of what you and so many others have gone through the 60s Scoop? What are the plans from the federal government level?
The plan so far is for them to go through all the applications, and once they're done and they approve them all, then the second interment payment will be based on how much money they got left. And that's about it. Like, it seems like that's it. Move on. We paid you off. Just move on with your life. But like I said, with the residential school issue, the government did a public acknowledgement in House of Commons, and then the Native chiefs were there. The priests were there. Like, everyone did a huge, we're sorry this happened. Realize the damage it did. With us, it's like a quiet payoff. And I don't know if that's because COVID-19 is happening that we can't all go into the House of Commons right now. But it just seems like it's like just being pushed away.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing your story. And again, we're going to hear more of your story in the days to come. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for liking, commenting, and subscribing. And let us know what you think about today's topic right there in the comments.